I'd like to take this moment and introduce you to what we affectionately call the contraption. Now, I was going to do a video on this originally when it was here a couple months ago, and you may have seen it in the background of some other videos. I had the small Harbor Freight red lift over here, and this thing was on it. I wanted to go over what we're going to be doing on it and the reason why it's coming back too. There's a couple of things that I need to fix from before, sort of new and sort of existing. And then I'll kind of go over what I did with it before, because I did shoot some clips on it originally, and I can probably B-roll a few of those in here to make it a little bit more clear. So I'll show you the list. All right, so here's the list I referred to. You said that 2 right cylinders are not running. That indicates 3 and 4. I don't see how that's possible because of the wasted spark system, but we'll figure that out here in a bit. Rear brakes locks up, so I guess he's ridden this thing. I don't know how, which is a safety issue. We'll have to dig into that. It's got numerous oil leaks, so we'll figure that out as well. Handlebars. He's got some longer or wider handlebars. Wants the same grips on them. It's a control issue because the way the front end geometry, it kind of just throws over to the side. There's some stuff I did in the original work that kind of relates to this that I'll show you. And then forward controls. I don't know if we're going to be able to do this with the kit that he provided. This is where he got them from, Vicious Cycles. He provided some phone numbers in case I needed to call him for some assistance or something. But anyway, so that's what we have as far as the task list for this phase of the work. All right, so we've got a blown fuse here. It's a 15 ampere. It originally was in here. This is something I want to redo. There's a lot of things on this I just couldn't get to before. You got to understand that this thing was in for some major modification work, and I just could not do any more on it at that time. It's really unrideable. That's why these are here, which I'll get into, because this thing just falls over as soon as it, you turn it, because of the geometry of the front end, which is horrible. Okay, so it's not running on 2 cylinders. That blown fuse is kind of telltale. It wouldn't be running on any cylinders except for the fact that it blew the fuse, because the number 2 and number 3 cylinder coil is dead shorted. The switch here, there's no key. The ignition switch was left on. I found it in the on position. The last time it was ran, when it came to a stop, it must have come to a stop with the 2 and 3 coil points connected. In other words, providing current and voltage to this coil. That caused the coil to overheat and dead short. That's why the main fuse was blown. So I'll show you what this is reading right now as far as readings go. Yeah, that's pretty much a dead short, 0.5 ohms. This thing should be at least 3 ohms, 3.5 ohms, whatever it's rated for. Here's the other coil, the one that is good, just as a comparo for you. This is showing 3.3 ohms. It's a good thing that that main fuse blew, because this could have burnt up and actually started a fire. And so that's why that wasn't working. So I'm going to order some generic coils up like these and replace them. We'll get it running, because I had this thing running pretty well. I don't have any clips of it. I will shoot some for this video when we get it running again. It's impossible to hear it anyway because of the open pipes. I mean, if I put the microphone out by that RV maybe, you might be able to hear the thing. We'll figure something out at that point. The carbs have been all done and balanced. I did some shenanigans with the overflow tubes. I think I have a video on that. That's from these carbs. He said the rear brake locks the wheel up when you just touch the pedal. And you know what? He's right. If you just breathe on this thing, that thing just locks right up. See, this rear end here was an absolute and complete disaster. Wobbly, the bearings were completely shot. The way this is set up, there is a bearing on the inside past this brake panel. Essentially, the drum brake panel is your spacer on the right side, and then you have a bearing, and then you have another bearing on the other side of the hub, and then there's a bearing inside this sprocket gizmo here where the chain is. As far as the rear wheel goes, the spacer between the 2 bearings, the bearings that I replaced, this is one of them here, is not a problem. That's the original spacer that was in there, and it makes good contact with both sides of the bearing, the inner bearing and the outer bearing. So I'll show you the one that was the problem or missing. The problem with the spacer was in this assembly right here. It was missing a spacer like this. This is the one I made for it when I put it back together. So there was a big gap of about that wide between that bearing and the inner bearing on the sprocket side where those dampers go, where these guys slip into. And so that's what was pulling those bearings inward toward this side and destroying the bearings. So again, this one I made just out of 1045. It just fits perfect and it takes up that space. I couldn't test ride this because this thing is impossible with my back. I guess he'd been able to ride it. He's an older gentleman too, which is quite amazing. That front drum, which I'm going to go over here in a second as far as the front end work I did before, absolutely 100% useless. So you got to rely on this rear brake, at least for forward momentum, cessation of travel. Let's put it that way. I'm going to have to take this all apart. So we're going to do that here momentarily, but I don't know what's wrong with it. I don't know if a spring let loose or something let loose in there and a shoe is like jamming up. That sounds probably like what's happening. Or the shoes are flipped. I think they're specific as to front and back. Naturally, I had this out, but I didn't have the brake panel apart. I just set it aside and then put it back on. Hell, I don't know. That makes the most logical sense. That could be the problem. We'll take it off here, like I said, in a minute. Let me show you what I did in the front of this thing. It just had like a regular spoke wheel, kind of a generic wheel. And he wanted a drum brake on the front, mainly to kind of hold it back when you're sitting on a slight incline or a grade or something. This thing is completely useless. Even though it pulls great, I made all this stuff work. All the spacers, the bar for the locking, in other words, the torque arm for this front brake, all disassemblable, if that's a word. I had to machine the front axle to make it work, machined a new nut for this side out of a wheel lug nut because it was the right thread. I think I single pointed that to whatever, I don't remember what it was. The brake sucks because it's inherently a piece of crap front end, really, as far as the wheel goes. I wish it worked better. And I made this little doodad. It's kind of hard to explain. You had to be there, but if I zoom up on it from the back, you can see it's got a little cutaway in there. That's so you can get the cable end out, the ferrule end of the cable. And I redid all that too with my cable kit. This is the original cable that came with it, but it was like 3 miles too long. Now I'm wishing it was that long because when we put these bars on, it's going to shoot everything way over to the side. It may work because the brake is looped way over to that opposite side, so that may actually fit. I don't think the throttle cable is going to work, and I'm 100% sure that the clutch cable is not going to work because that barely fit. That is a KZ1000J, I think. I don't remember if it's a J or an A, B, or a D clutch cable. I made it work, but this was a lot of machining. It was just impossible to film it all. I mean, it works as far as doesn't bind up, it spins both ways, you know, backwards and forwards. When you activate the brake here, I mean, it pulls it fine. Oh, by the way, I meant to tell you, I did not supply these parts. This was supplied by a third party. They supplied that, they did the tire, and I just made everything work together. I'll get this apart, and then we'll come back and take a look and see what's going on with that rear brake. Before I do that, let me just demonstrate this for you. So if I just turn this, it turns great. I mean, you just breathe on this thing. And it, I moved this thing maybe 3/8 of an inch. It's locked up, man. Ugh. So that ain't right. I'm pretty sure this is a Honda CB750 OEM rear wheel, brake panel, the whole bit. Well, the springs are in there. Numbers on the brake shoes are the same. So I got no idea why I'd be doing that. There's a little bit of chunkiness here, but I guess what we could do is just get new shoes for it. I bet you they're not cheap though. You got me on this one. They're both working properly. They're both spreading out when you activate it. So the torque arm goes down. Not sure if that's the way it is on a CB750. Maybe the torque arm is up on those. I'm spitballing here, I don't know. Maybe this part is supposed to be up. I don't see why that would make a hill of beans worth of difference, but... Well, I don't know. I looked up 77 CB750 photo, and I see this down... excuse me, this is the ground level down here. This is where I see this hanging down past the exhaust. So that means the torque arm's about in the same spot. Activation arm here, this guy here is in the same spot. So I honestly don't know why this thing would be locking up so much. I mean, it just absolutely locks up. I know in the old days when we had brakes that were doing this on old drum brake, you just shotgun the brakes and it solved it. So I'm just going to order some new shoes for it, see if that helps. I don't know if that's going to help it or not, but it's the only thing I can do. There's absolutely nothing rubbing in here. There's plenty of space between that inner and that bearing. It's not grabbing out here. There's no shiny bits. It's working the way it's supposed to, it looks like. So, I mean, this is a stretch, but I'm thinking of this logically, analytically. Now, those shoes are a little worn, more so on one side than the other, and that would make sense. It would be up here because this is the part that spreads out when the thing is activated. So if this thing is worn to the point where, oh, you know what? I think our answer is right there. Yeah, I think this pad is just worn, this shoe rather, is just worn right down. It's almost level with that right there, you see? And so if these things are spreading out like this, it means the only surface contact is on the top here. Let me turn it this way and show you. So this is the bottom, basically, or close to the bottom, because it goes about like that. Maybe it's like that. And the wheel's turning forward. This one, probably the radius that's on it now, the shape that it's in, because it's worn down, is probably grabbing. It's probably pulling that pad, or that shoe, I keep calling them pads, probably pulling that shoe in, and it is just locking it up. This side would be the trailing edge. This side would be the leading edge in the direction of clockwise rotation, basically. You know, looking at it this way. Well, theoretically, I'm thinking, or hypothetically, in other words, I'm spitballing. I bet you this, when this thing activates and it goes out, there's only a very small amount of this pad. Keep calling them pads, the shoe, Jesus. And it's locking the thing up. So I think the best thing we can do is just replace them, and I think that's probably going to solve the problem. They're original. They're the original ones. The era original ones, not necessarily the original ones, but... Okay, I'm pretty sure I figured this problem out. You eagle-eyed folks out there probably already knew this, because yesterday I'm still running on about 7 cylinders. I was down with the heat most of the weekend because it was just so hot. Friday I really overdid it. Today I'm a little bit thinking clearer. So right here is your leading edge when it's in a clockwise fashion, as I said in the last clip. So going around like this. And it's grabbing here. You can see it's kind of chewed up, a little jagged. So what's happening, obviously, is when the brake's applied and this goes up, it's contacting right here, and it's just the right angle inside there to grab that drum and essentially lock it up. It wants to continue to pull this up, almost like a wedge. That's what's happening. So the question is why? According to my research, I've spent about 2 hours on the computer between yesterday and today figuring this out, is most definitely a Honda brake panel. It comes up with a Honda part number for the shoes, and this comes back to a number of models, but I'm going to go with one specifically because it looks like this the most. It's like a CB750, CB500, something like that. Because I found a few on eBay, these brake panels that are identical to this. I can't find any other numbers in it. Then again, I haven't taken it apart and cleaned the crap out of it to tell. If it is a Honda part number, it'll have like a 3-digit or something inside there. Kind of like, you know, the Magna's like MB0. Now, as far as the wheel goes, I was assuming this was a Honda wheel. This most definitely is not a Honda wheel that I can tell at all. There is no reference markings on it whatsoever. Typically, the Hondas have it listed on the edge of the rim. There's nothing on this rim. This is a 16-inch rim. According to the tire, standard rim is 3 inches wide, so it's a 16 by 3. I can't find any Honda model that takes a rear wheel with anything less than a 17 from that era. This is some Harley Davidson, or probably a Harley wheel, I don't know. The only numbers in it are this right here. I'll zoom up in B-roll, but it's A1215 and then 2U. Looks like a U. This brake panel is too small for that opening of the drum. According to this, the maximum ID listed is 181 mils. So if we go inside here, that's most definitely 181. Now we'll take the brake panel from the outside of the pad to the shoe to the outside of the shoe. And it's 175 mils. I know this is worn, of course, but it's 5 millimeters, 6 millimeters small. And then when you put this in here, and lift it up so it's not capturing any of the registers there. So that's why when this thing was in, this thing would have to be taken up about that far before it even start touching. And in that point, it's angled up that far. So you can see that that leading edge is going to be in a perfect position to jam this sucker up because it's simply too small. In other words, the rest of this shoe ain't doing jack. It's mainly the leading edge here and the trailing edge here. Now, interestingly, this is metric. Metric bearings were put into it. I just duplicated the bearings that were in there. Maybe the outside here where the bearings go in is a standard on whatever this is from. And then they just put a metric bearing to match this. But that is also, as far as the sprocket and stuff goes, that's metric too, because it all lines up to a metric axle. I'm assuming that's metric. It's got to be. This is a Honda part. I'm almost 100% sure this is a Honda part. So this is the problem. The problem is it's just too small for that. And it's binding up. It has to be much closer. And I'm not 100% sure what the solution is going to be to this. All right, folks, about 4 or 5 days later, we've got some new shoes installed into the now cleaned up brake panel. And I want to show you a couple things. First thing, I took the old shoes, which are really big shoes, more on that here in a second, and I measured across them and came up with between 175 mil and 177 mil when you do kind of like an X pattern with the scale. I just used the metric ruler here. Down at this location here, which is that what I believe to be the wedge point, this is 177 across that point to its mating shoe over here. Now this one, these new shoes, it's only mocked up right now, just pushed in, you know, no springs or nothing. These shoes are about 179 to 179.5 millimeters at any direction as far as measuring, which is really good. Because we had 175 to 177, the other ones, because these are so worn. Now these are markedly wider than these shoes. And if I put a clip in here of an old shoe and a new shoe installed, you can vividly see that. Is that going to be a problem? I don't know. These suckers lay right in the center of where these larger or wider shoes would have been. In other words, they're not biased one way or the other. So that's pretty good. So the old shoes were about 39 millimeters wide, and these are 31. So there's 8 millimeters difference, or 4 mil on a side. Now I got these from Common Motor Collective. Decided that this was going to be basically based off a CB750 brake panel because that made the most sense. I don't exactly remember the logic for deciding that because I shot that clip a week ago. But that's pretty much what we decided at that point, so I ordered CB750 rear brake shoes. All right, now as far as the drum goes, I only have Imperial measuring tools here, but I used my caliper. I'll show you what I did here, my big 8-inch. Oh, yeah. And got a measurement of this. And this is 7 inches and 80 thou. 181 millimeters is 7 inches, 125 thou. So we are well below the maximum on this, even though I have no stinking idea what wheel this goes off of or hub as far as an application. If anybody out there recognizes this wheel or this number, I'd sure appreciate it if you let me know. Based on this, at least, it's not too big. So now we have pads that are almost 179 millimeters. Well, the Google machine says that 7.080 Imperial is 179 and change millimeters. So since we're about almost 179 measuring it with the scale, that should solve our problem. So we'll go ahead and get this all assembled as far as the brake panel over there. And then I guess I'll just put it back on the bike and see how it behaves. All right, folks, changing plans. We're not going to be using these guys from a CB750 on this, being that they're so narrow. I did some research online. The CB750 widths are these, 39 to 40 millimeters. And this is the only serviceable brake really on this bike. So we're going to go with the wider shoe. Based on the thickness of these, we'd have to assume that the replacements that I'm getting, which are EBCs actually, are going to be about the same thickness here. So essentially that diameter parity still works out. And so these were kind of a good test for that. Now I'm going to hang on to these because you never know, I might get a CB550 or 450 in here. But I'm not going to put those narrow shoes on. I'm going to put the right width on. That way we know it's going to work good and it'll be safer. I'm going to put this on hold. I ordered them from Amazon. They're EBC 321s, as I said. Brake Crafters does not have them in stock, although they normally show that they stock them. Otherwise, I get them from Brake Crafters. I know I'm bouncing around a little bit, but that's the way it works with these custom projects, especially when parts don't fit. So this is my second set. These EBCs that I was referring to, brake shoes that I ordered that are EBC 321s. I thought it said 320s. I could have sworn the Amazon sale ad or the Amazon, whatever they call it, listing said 320 EBC. But these guys, I don't think they're going to work. Can you tell what the problem is with them? I mean, I can't really tell, but maybe you can. So that's two pairs or two sets of rear brake shoes that are no bueno as far as on this brake panel. So I don't know. I ordered a set of EBC 320s, 320 this time, from Dennis Kirk. So I'm hoping that those are the right ones. If those fail to, I'm going to return these, but if those fail to fit, then we're going to go with the CB750 ones, the narrower ones, and put them in here because I don't know what goes in this, you know, when it's called custom parts and pieced together from garbage. So that's what we're going to do. Hopefully they'll be here a few days and we'll take a look at them then. But we got other stuff to do, so we'll just do that in the meantime. All right, so the new coils are installed. I did a completely different job as far as installation goes, and I'll try to put up a pre and post as far as the installation of this versus the way it was. It was really sloppy and they were hanging down straight. Type of clamps you'd use for conduit, pretty crappy. So I machined this plate out of just aluminum and put a radius on the inside here to match the radius on this spine of the frame. Kind of locks it in a little bit. And then I took advantage of, it's kind of hard to see, but I took advantage of a bolt that was already there. See that bolt right up in there? But it's actually a stud that's welded to the frame. See, originally that was a place for chains to attach to. And what the chains were for, they acted as limits for the way, as far as the handlebars could turn. In other words, there was no stops on the steering head for this thing to go one way or another and then stop. It would just smack right into the tank. So there was two chains. There was a chain attached here and it went to that stud and another chain over there. Really stupid. So I ended up doing is on the original work, machining and welding in some proper stops. These ends are hardened. These are hardened steel and they're pressed into these kind of radius pieces of 1045. And so now we've got good stops. So that was empty. So I saw that and I said, you know, let's just use that to bolt up our plate. In addition to, there's one, it's really hard to see. There's one M6 thread that goes up into the spine of the frame through here with an M6 bolt to hold this backside. So this thing is solid as a rock. So at least we got some use out of that thing instead of just cutting it off and then grinding it flat and touching up the paint. So that worked out pretty well, I think. I'm going to kind of customize up these runs here, get some of those alignment things you clip on ignition wire. I have some, but they're not big enough for this insulation on the outside. It's probably about 10 mil, I imagine. It looks pretty good. And I got all the wiring at least done temporarily. This wiring is just extended because it'll be going up and replacing this connection here, which was the power for the headlight and so forth up here. And I can't do it yet because I still have to put the bars on, which extends everything out, and I have to redo all the wiring up here anyway. These are 4.5 ohm coils, not 3 ohm coils, from what I read online and what the Z1 Enterprises site said. It's supposed to be 4.5 for the CB750s. Apparently the 3 ohms allow too much current to be pulled through the points and they tend to burn up a little prematurely. So I think it came out really well. Looks a lot better and it fits a lot better and it'll just be better overall for the long term. All right, as usual, more bouncing around, but again, this is what happens when you got custom crap with multiple problems. So this is what we have right now. We've got the generator cover off. More on that here in a second. I've been doing some extensive work on these carbs. We will run this eventually, I promise. I have had it running quite a bit. I have it running, I think, better than originally. I did some shenanigans with the jetting on this. I hope I didn't go too far. But I did a valve clearance check first. I said, you know what, I better check that. First of all, one of these caps, I think it's over on number 4 now. I don't remember where it came from, has a big dent on the inside of it. Apparently one of the stems, the nuts on the stems came loose at some point and smacked one of those caps. Each one of these stem and nuts, the nuts on the stems, were loose as a goose. You could have taken a 10 mil nut driver like this and put it on that stem, assuming it would reach down to the nut itself and turn it, and you would have been able to loosen it. That's how loose they were. And so I adjusted all of them and they were super far out. They were all wicked loose. Some of these were so loose.
How loose were they?
That when you went to take them up to the appropriate clearance, I had to turn each one of the stems a quarter of a turn. The factory clearance specs on these, on the exhaust side, it's 0.08 millimeters or 0.03 thousandths of an inch. And over here it's 0.02 of an inch or 0.05 millimeters. And now they're all set exactly to that. Then I ran it again, and to be honest with you, I think it ran worse than when I had it in the first time. In a little bit, we're fixing to find out exactly why it seems to run worse. I was really having trouble with the lower end as far as the idle and the mixture. These are pressed-in jets. I measured the pressed-in jets, the slow pilot jets that is, with pin gauges. They're already oversized. I made them even bigger. I had no choice. They had 115 mains. I said that's way too small. I wanted to go to 120s, but I don't have any 120s. But I did have 125s. They may be a little bit big. Or I'm going to have to order a set, because I think it's a little bit on the rich side. It doesn't blow any black smoke or anything, and it still does kind of backfire pop once in a while. But the timing is spot on. I think a lot of the problems, though, are electrical, because the battery is going flat, which is why this is off. And the reason why is that it wasn't charging. I could have sworn when it was in the first time several months ago, I checked that and it was charging, but I could be wrong. I could be confusing with another bike. I'm not exactly sure what the problem is. I had to take this apart anyway to diagnose an oil leak. So there's the cover down there. There's the mess right there. I also pulled the cover off the shifter side, the shifter cover, to make sure that the gasket was okay. It was, but inside that cover, on the bottom, there's all sorts of metal sludge, that powdery metal sludge. And that really worries me because I don't know where it's coming from. In this cover, there's supposed to be 2 locating knock pins, one here and one there. There were no pins. On this cover, which is way more critical, there's likewise supposed to be 2 locating pins. There were no locating pins on this either. So somebody just put this on and kind of eyed it in. Now the clearances between the field coil and the stator and the rotor are extremely tight on these. There is evidence that something's been hitting in here. It's all jagged edged up here. It has to be cleaned up. There's some evidence inside here as well. It's not that clear right now because I got to take all this apart, but there are chunks down in there, and that's not good. And I stuck my magnet down. They are ferrous chunks. So we'll get to that later. And you can see, look at that screw right there. That screw's all jagged up, so somebody was in here for that. The oil leak was coming from the grommet, which is typically where it comes from. There's no gasket goo or nothing in there. Now these test okay, sort of. The field coil is dead nuts on, just about dead nuts on, resistance-wise. No shorts to ground. It's only 2 wires on that anyway. And on the 3 stator wires, I can't determine 100% what the appropriate resistance is. The service manual says 0.2 ohms. This is 0.6 ohms right here. And if you go from the harness side, it's 0.8 ohms because the connections basically suck between here and here. There's a lot of resistance potential here on these bullet connectors and this connector that goes in there. I think the stator's okay because I'm finding some reference on forums about, 0.8 ohms is about right. 0.6 to 0.8. There's no shorts to ground on the stator wires either, the 3 yellows. So I think that's okay. So let me go ahead and get this apart because one of the problems is leaking through the holes that hold the field coil in from the outside. I think there's supposed to be sealing washers, like copper washers in there. I'm sure they're missing. I hope the case isn't cracked, but you never know. Well, the stator looks okay. It's just got grunge on it, like metal goo. I'll show you the inside of the cover. That's even worse. But here's, I think, where a lot of it came from. This is the side of the field coil that bolts on the inside of the cover. That's the screws that go through from the outside. And you can see that there's some rub marks here, some pretty significant ones on the steel. We're hitting on the inside of the rotor. I'll show you the inside of the rotor. That's the one I said was all kind of chunked up. And that's where a lot of this is probably coming from. So this field coil essentially is like this, in this orientation, and goes inside the rotor because when it's energized, it turns on the magnetic field as opposed to a permanent magnet rotor. This thing, clearance-wise, is extremely tight. That's why you have to have pins. And by the way, I failed to mention before that I did replace the pins there because I have some older ones, you know, some leftovers in stock, and I shall replace them on this as well. I got a couple more. So that was stupid, whoever did that. I don't know why they would do something like that. So that's probably where a lot of this metal was coming from, considering it's right here and underneath there, but it could be from the inside of the motor too. So inside here is all kind of chewed up from that. We'll have to address that up with some emery, clean it all up, and get everything mounted. And I'll show you the cover in this freaking debacle of a mess over here, which I really got to get cleaned up. But I probably won't. Okay, so inside there you can see chunks. That's all ferrous, that goo in there. So I got to clean all this out. Let's grab a little prick tool. Okay, there is one at this hole down about 4 o'clock. Up here, there is one as well at 12 o'clock. And I don't think there's one at all at 8 o'clock. Not to mention the concrete machining job here. I don't think that's asphalt. That surface finish sure looks like concrete, don't you think? I think I found the other part where it was rubbing, this time on the inside. On the inside of the field coil, you can see the demarcation or delineation line right there. Whoops! So what that was rubbing on is the center hub part of that rotor, which would be this part right in here. Again, there's very little clearance in there. You must, and I mean must have, the pins, the locating pins, the knock pins. Oh well, we'll fix her. I do have a new gasket for this. I did have the foresight to order one of those. So we shall put a brand new gasket on here, and we'll seal up the penetration inside the cover where the grommets are for both the field coil and the stator. All right, so we're all good here on the generator side of it. All went back together very well. And I've got the pins in so it's aligned properly on both this cover, as I said, and on the main generator. And I took the box out because I'm doing some work. I figured out what's wrong with that it was wired incorrectly on the voltage regulator side. So that's all well and good and all done. But there is not everything is hunky-dory in this story. All right, so remember earlier in the video when I said this? You said that 2 right cylinders are not running. That indicates 3 and 4. I don't see how that's possible because of the wasted spark system, but we'll figure that out here in a bit. What I was referring to, of course, was the wasted spark system and the ignition system. 1 and 4 and 2 and 3 being companion cylinders. So if we're not firing, he says it's not firing on 3 and 4, that means that both coils have a problem. And that wasn't the case because it wouldn't run at all, right? It was running. So I naturally assumed he was talking about an ignition problem. But cylinder head's got to come off, folks. Unfortunately, in this video, we're pretty much out of time to go into the details of it, so you're just going to have to wait for the next episode, the thrilling... Okay, now you guys know I wouldn't leave you hanging like that. I mean, I'm capable of leaving you hanging like that. I mean, I could do it. In other words, it wouldn't bother me. I'd be able to sleep tonight, but I'm not going to do it. So let me go into at least briefly what's going on here. Okay, so this is what happened. The owner drops by, just kind of shoot the shit and drop some stuff off. He wants a different headlight put on and some other stuff. And I know the charging system's disassembled as far as the voltage regulator and so forth, but it's got enough battery charge to fire it up. Carbs are on. You know, this was all back together, obviously. And I said, let me start it up for you. So I started it up for him. And he says, I don't think it's running on number 4 still. And I said, no, it's running on number 4. When you gas it, blue flame comes out there once in a while. He said, yeah, it was popping like that before. And I said, well, I'm pretty sure it's running because it gets somewhat hot as far as the pipe, but it's not as hot as the other ones. And so I shut it off and I said, let's check the spark plug. So we pull the plug out and the plug is like soaking wet, rich. And I said, uh-oh, what's going on with that? So we hooked the plug up to the number 4 wire, put it on top of the head cover, sparking fine. But the engine started when we did that. And with that spark plug sitting there sparking away and an open spark plug hole in number 4, this sucker ran just as good as it did when that thing was installed. And I go, holy cow, shut it down, you know, take the spark plug out, put it down, get it out of the way, start it up again. And then I shoved my finger down inside that hole. Just went down inside that hole and blocked that hole off. And I was able to do that without it pushing my finger off while it was sitting there idling around 900,000 RPM. Number 4, don't have any compression.
What the hell?
Now at this point, I did do a compression test too with the actual compression tester, and it showed 0 compression on that number 4 cylinder. Pulled out the dangly bit, shoved it down in there after I barred it over to a point where I could see the exhaust valve because I suspected it was exhaust valve. Then I put the leak down tester on it, and we barred it over again until both valves were closed. And when you put the leak down tester on it, it was blowing so much air out the exhaust side. It was kind of comical, actually. You could sit here and do this with your hand and play a freaking tune on this thing. I mean, it was actually rather comical. So at that point, we said, uh-oh, you know, what else is going to go? What other cylinders do we have a problem with? Now, I'll show you some footage, as far as photos, rather, from the dangly bit of the exhaust valve on number 4 and the cylinder on number 4. The cylinder looks great, sort of. It does look like this top end was done, but it looks like somebody used a piece of Scotch-Brite in there to prep the cylinder walls for new rings, but the pistons look really good. When I say pistons, I didn't check all 4 with the dangly bit, but I did check number 1 along with number 4 here because the plugs are just easier to get out. That piston looks great too, but the walls of that cylinder, again, look like they were kind of... So I don't know what the status of the pistons and the rings really are. I guess we're going to have to kind of play that by ear once we pull the head off. But most definitely, based on, you can see from those dangly bit side camera photos, this exhaust valve is completely packed with crap, or the seat and the face are completely shot. So that's what's going to happen tomorrow. We're going to go ahead and pull the head off, but that's not going to be on this video. This one's getting long enough already. So you're going to have to wait for the next video, for real this time, to find out what's going on inside there. But at least I didn't want to keep you in suspense. I wanted to let you know what was going on. Now, I know some of you folks out there are shaking your heads going, how in the hell does a guy like that, who has, you know, pretty good experience on these old bikes, miss something like that? I honestly don't have an answer. I botched it. I screwed up, and I don't hide from my mistakes, as I put in other videos. This was a big one. I should have not discounted another causation for it not running properly on 1 or more cylinders. And when he said, hey, it's not running on the 2 right cylinders, I shouldn't have just kind of poo-pooed that, which is what I did. I poo-pooed it and said, nah, he's wrong. It's got to be either 2 and 3 or 1 and 4. And if I had really taken that to heart and thought about it, I'd have said, wait a minute. If it's running at all and it's not running on the 2 right cylinders, there's got to be another problem besides ignition. Otherwise, it wouldn't be running at all, as I said before. So, you know, this sucker was telling us a story, and I refused to listen to the story. That's what happened. So, yeah, I made a mistake, and but I'll correct it. We'll get it right. But I wanted to just say, you know, I'm stupid. Don't do what I do sometimes, because sometimes I am stupid. Now, the owner said, go ahead and let's fix it. I mean, what choice do we have? So that's why we're embarking on this particular endeavor at this point. Endeavor to persevere. And that's exactly what we're doing right now. We're persevering and endeavoring to do just that. So if you want to see more on this crap, you need to stick around. You know what you need to do that. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, and you get notified when I put more junk like this up. Well, hopefully the next video will get a little bit more answers. You'll just have to, again, wait for then to find out, because just the way it is in the YouTube land, all right? So as always, thanks for watching. Don't just repair, restore, and we'll catch you on that next video. That valve is bent. And you can kind of see it right there. You see that mark in the valve relief as far as on the piston on the exhaust side? Yeah, you think that's a wee bit bent? That sucker's bent too. Here's that cap. This is the only one like it. It smacked the cap and backed off enough. This is, of course, at the tappet end. So this was smacking down on this. And this is harder than that, said the wife. So, there's your answer.